Welcome back. The Army is focused on modernizing the service, as well as fixing challenges to ammunition supply chain and integrating artificial intelligence. Getting soldiers' hands on the things they need to fight effectively is the job of Doug Bush, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. Bush stopped by our studio at AUSA to talk about updates in his efforts to arm the Army.
Welcome back to the third day of AUSA. I'm Jen Judson, land warfare reporter for Defense News, and we're here with the Honorable Doug Bush, who is in charge of Army acquisition. I wanted to ask you a little bit about what's coming up.
Sure.
You have been driving towards an Army of 2030, a modernized Army of 2030, lots of programs that you are in charge of to get to that point. You've hit a lot of really great milestones in the past couple of years, especially this year. Almost 24 systems by the end of 2023 in the hands of soldiers. So what are some of the big moments that you're watching for in 2024?
So one is making sure we continue momentum. So some of what we did in 23 was still somewhat small scale in terms of initial prototypes or first fieldings. We've got to now do, in some ways, a lot the harder part, which is scale, to actually start deploying entire units worth of stuff, do all the sustainment planning, all the things that come behind kind of sometimes the fun part of designing a new technology and seeing if it works. The rest of the story is for example, sustainment, making sure that the whole system now supports units with equipment. So even on things like AMPV, which is now in full rate production, well, part of that is that supply chain that comes behind it. So that's one focus area, is continuing momentum on the big items, IPCS, Booker, some other big ones. But looking forward, I mean, what's coming in the next year is a whole nother series of things where we're taking prototypes to production. So, for example, PRISM Inc. 1, we're hoping to get our first production missiles imminently to actually do our first full-up test and then start fielding that rapidly. And that particular program, we got a challenging schedule from the Army based on the requirement to go really fast. And the team before me came up with the idea of the early operational capability missiles kind of running in parallel with the big program. So great idea. So I think that's going to be a model, because Increment 2, for example, we want to initiate that program and get it started. But again, we have an aggressive date the Army wants it by. So that's one, for example, the Stinger replacement, while also still keeping Stinger production in good shape, is another one. And then next year is really when the production ramp-ups for Ukraine hit big time. So keeping artillery on track, keeping Gimlers on track to get to 14,000 a year, keeping Javelin on track to double to 4,000 a year, and everything that goes behind it. So 24 will be really a year where a lot of the initiatives to scale happen. So that's our focus.
I did want to ask about Stinger. I mean, obviously you're working on a replacement, but that's not going to come overnight. Meanwhile, we're sending Stinger to Ukraine. It's being used prevalently in the Army for, say, short-range air defense. Do you have concerns about the supply for Stinger at this point? I mean, are you able to? I mean, this is a system that you weren't building new ones. So how are you managing that supply for Stinger at this point?
Well, that one in particular. First of all, yes, over the past year, a tremendous amount of work has been done by Raytheon to reinvigorate that supply chain, get the people back. I know they brought people out of retirement who knew how to do things. It's a great weapon. It's just was built in an era when everything was kind of handmade. So we have what we have. The other part of the effort has been refurbishing. So I visited McAllister Army Depot in Oklahoma, where we're taking old ones and just improving them and giving them more shelf life, which is another way to pad the stocks. So that's more than 1,000 missiles right there. And recently, demand from Ukraine has not been as high. We flooded them with a lot. That's tailed off a bit, which has given us a little breathing room to improve our stocks and increase production. But I believe the foreign military sales demand is still very high. So that's what we're trying to posture to do with Raytheon. But it's a good example of when, and the line wasn't dead. It was just very limited for one customer.
Lukewarm.
The tens a month. Versus now we want to get up to north of 60 with a path to higher. So.
Okay. All right. Shifting over, the Army's starting to focus on more things that it may need in the Pacific, but also in Europe. Both theaters are very important. Watercraft in the Pacific, and bridging. For instance, for white gap crossings come to mind, where we have capability, but our capability could probably be better. So what is the Army doing with both of those areas in terms of acquisition pathways for modernized capability?
So on new watercraft, MSVL, Maneuver Support Vessel Light, is this year's been a big year for it because we got our first one. And like a lot of first of class, like in shipbuilding, costs were higher than expected. We found all the problems in building a vessel like that. And then our vendor, there were some challenges they had, with their parent company that we had to work through. But we're now, I think, clear and running on that one. We took a long time to negotiate the new price, but that's concluded. We're ready to get into LRIP. So, and the demand signal for that vessel, a full company of them is sky high. So that's one reason we're willing to take a bit of risk on the cost, because it's the Army really wants it.
Yeah, you hear a lot of commanders talking about that.
But the cost increase, I wasn't entirely surprised. I mean, materials cost more, labor costs more, and then on the Army side, this is what's yet to come. Requirements drive the cost too. So if the Army wants it a certain way and it's harder to build that in a shipyard, well, that adds time and money. But I think we've got the program in a good place now to hopefully get additional funding within the budget for next year to get it on a stable production path that delivers. Bridging's a little easier. It's just, we already had the contracts, we have the programs. It's just aligning the money. The Army made a decision, really, I believe, to add companies, so add engineer companies that do that. And then the next step is aligning the budget to actually equip them. I know that's been a major effort in 25, is just following through on that plan. As far as I know, we're on track. It's just finding the money. But it's a big priority, especially they learned a lot from trying to, moving units around Europe. They found all the hard parts.